What if I told you that one company discovered a way to make millions of people willingly spend thousands of dollars, again and again, without forcing anyone? That company is Apple. Today, Apple is worth around $4 trillion, more valuable than the economies of many countries. But here's the unbelievable part. Apple didn't get there because it always had the best technology. In fact, it was once just weeks away from collapse. Its own founder was pushed out. Experts predicted it would disappear forever. So, how did a company that nearly died become one of the richest businesses in human history? The answer isn't just about the iPhone. It's about a secret strategy that has kept millions of people locked into Apple's world for years. And once you understand that strategy, you'll never look at Apple the same way again. The year was 1976. Back then, computers weren't designed for ordinary people. They were expensive, complicated, and mostly used by governments, universities, and large companies. Almost everyone believed computers would never become personal, but two young men refused to believe that. Steve Wozniak could build incredible machines. Steve Jobs could imagine how those machines could change the world. Inside a small garage in California, they built the Apple I. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't powerful, but it proved one revolutionary idea. A computer could belong to anyone. Most people ignored it. Apple kept building anyway, and that decision would change history forever. But success was about to create Apple's biggest enemy, itself. Apple grew faster than anyone expected. The Apple II became a massive success. Money poured in. The company went public. Then came the Macintosh, a computer with a graphical interface and a mouse. Technology that felt years ahead of its time. But while customers loved Apple's innovation, inside the company, a war had begun. Steve Jobs demanded perfection. Executives demanded predictable profits. Eventually, the conflict exploded. After a bitter power struggle, the board sided against Jobs. The man who created Apple was forced out of his own company. Imagine building your dream, only to watch someone else take it away. For most people, that would have been the end. For Steve Jobs, it was only the beginning. Without Jobs, Apple slowly lost its direction. Too many confusing products, weak leadership, poor decisions. Meanwhile, Microsoft and Windows were taking over the world. By the mid-1990s, Apple was losing huge amounts of money. Analysts believed bankruptcy was inevitable. Some even predicted Apple wouldn't survive another year. The company that inspired the future was running out of time. Then, everything changed with one unexpected decision. In 1997, Apple bought a company called Next. Along with it, Steve Jobs returned. But he didn't come back to celebrate. He came back to save a dying company. He eliminated dozens of products, simplified Apple's entire lineup, focused on quality instead of quantity. Then, something happened that shocked the entire tech industry. Microsoft, Apple's biggest rival, invested $150 million in Apple. The company everyone thought was finished had one final chance. Nobody knew it yet, but Apple was preparing to change the world again. First came the colorful iMac. Simple, beautiful, different. Then, in 2001, Apple launched the iPod. Apple didn't invent portable music players. It simply made them effortless. Thousands of songs, one small device. Combined with iTunes, buying music became incredibly easy. For the first time, Apple wasn't just selling hardware. It was selling an experience. And that experience created trust. Trust that would soon become Apple's greatest weapon. Here's the secret most people never notice. Apple doesn't just sell products. It builds an ecosystem. You buy an iPhone, then AirPods, an Apple Watch, a MacBook, an iPad. You subscribe to iCloud, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus. Everything works together almost perfectly. Suddenly, leaving Apple doesn't feel impossible. It feels inconvenient. That's the genius. Apple never traps customers. It simply makes staying easier than leaving. And that's how billion-dollar businesses quietly become trillion-dollar empires. Here's the secret most people never notice. Apple doesn't just sell products. It builds an ecosystem. You buy an iPhone, then AirPods, an Apple Watch, a MacBook, an iPad. You subscribe to iCloud, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus. Everything works together almost perfectly. Suddenly, leaving Apple doesn't feel impossible. It feels inconvenient. That's the genius. Apple never traps customers. It simply makes staying easier than leaving. And that's how billion-dollar businesses quietly become trillion-dollar empires. Most people think Apple's business depends on selling iPhones, but that's only half the story. Every single month, millions pay for iCloud storage, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, App Store purchases, subscriptions. Developers also pay Apple commissions through the App Store. Services now generate tens of billions of dollars every year. That's called recurring revenue. Money that keeps coming long after the original sale. While competitors fight to sell the next phone, Apple keeps earning from the last one. And that's one of the biggest reasons investors value Apple so highly. Apple rarely rushes to be first. Instead, it waits, studies the market, learns from everyone else's mistakes, then launches a product that feels simple, polished, and complete. The iPhone wasn't first. The Apple Watch wasn't first. AirPods weren't first. But Apple made each category mainstream. Because people don't always buy the newest technology. They buy the easiest experience. And Apple understood that better than almost anyone.
So, how did Apple secretly build a $4 trillion empire? Not by inventing every product, not by making the cheapest devices, and not even by always having the best technology. Apple mastered something far more powerful: human psychology, design, brand loyalty, and an ecosystem so seamless that millions of people choose to stay inside it. People think Apple sells iPhones. In reality, Apple sells convenience, identity, trust, and once customers buy into that, the products almost sell themselves. Maybe that's the biggest lesson every entrepreneur can learn. The world's greatest companies don't just create products. They create systems that people never want to leave. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe, because the next business empire we uncover might completely change the way you see success forever.